On a bitter January morning in 1999, in the small mill town of Rochester, New Hampshire, a 23-year-old mother named Jennifer Walsh kissed her 2 children goodbye and left for her shift at the textile factory on the edge of town. Her husband, Michael Walsh, 31, a mechanic at the local garage, waved from the doorway of their modest Cape Cod home on Birch Street. By noon that same day, Jennifer Walsh would be reported missing. By evening, searchers would comb the frozen forests surrounding Rochester, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like desperate prayers. By the end of the week, investigators would begin to suspect that the person who knew what happened to Jennifer Walsh was the same person who had reported her missing. But it would take nearly 6 years, a child's whispered confession, and a community's collective unraveling before the truth would finally emerge. The question that haunted Rochester was not just what happened to Jennifer Walsh, but how long had the people closest to her known the answer. Part 1. The Vanishing. Rochester, New Hampshire, sits in the southeastern corner of the state, a town of approximately 30,000 souls built along the Cochico River. In 1999, it was a place still clinging to its industrial past, where the old brick textile mills stood like monuments to a more prosperous era, their windows dark, their machinery silent. The downtown consisted of a main street with a handful of shops, a diner called Bernie's that served breakfast all day, a single movie theater, and 3 churches. People knew each other here. They knew each other's parents and grandparents. They knew who drank too much, who was sleeping with whom, who had money troubles, who had family troubles. Privacy was a luxury no one could quite afford. The Walsh family lived on Birch Street, a narrow road lined with modest homes built in the 1950s, most of them showing signs of deferred maintenance. Peeling paint, sagging gutters, chain-link fences enclosing small yards where old swing sets rusted in the winter cold. The Walsh home was a pale yellow Cape Cod with brown shutters, a single-car garage, and a detached shed in the back where Michael kept his tools. Jennifer had hung lace curtains in the front windows, trying to make the place feel like a home. Their children, Emma, age 6, and Connor, age 4, shared a small bedroom on the second floor decorated with hand-me-down furniture and drawings taped to the walls. Jennifer Walsh was small, barely 5 feet 2 inches tall. With brown hair she kept pulled back in a ponytail and a quiet voice that often got lost in crowded rooms. Those who knew her described her as sweet, maybe too sweet, the kind of woman who apologized even when she had done nothing wrong. She had grown up in Rochester, graduated from the local high school, married Michael Walsh when she was 17 and he was 25. She worked the morning shift at Riverside Textiles, operating an industrial loom in a building that was always too hot in summer and too cold in winter. She brought her lunch in a brown paper bag. She never complained. Michael Walsh was a different sort of person, tall, broad-shouldered, with thick forearms and hands permanently stained with engine grease. He had grown up in Rochester too, dropped out of high school in his junior year and found work at McIntyre's garage on Route 16. He was good with engines, people said, could diagnose a problem just by listening. He drank beer most evenings, sometimes more than a few. He had a temper, though most people who mentioned it did so quietly, as if saying it too loud might summon it into being. The Walshes kept to themselves mostly. They did not go to church. They did not attend town meetings. When people saw them at the grocery store or the gas station, Michael did most of the talking while Jennifer stood beside him, her eyes on the floor. January 14, 1999 was a Thursday. The temperature at dawn was 12 degrees Fahrenheit. The sky was the color of old concrete. Jennifer Walsh woke at 5:30 in the morning, the alarm clock on the nightstand buzzing until she reached over and silenced it. She showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a sweater, pulled her hair back. She could hear Michael snoring in the bed behind her, the sound thick and wet. She went downstairs, made coffee in the percolator, poured herself a cup and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the backyard. The swing hung still on the metal frame. The toy truck Connor had left outside lay on its side near the fence, half buried in snow. She woke the children at 6:15. Emma dressed herself, pulling on corduroy pants and a turtleneck. Connor needed help with his buttons. Jennifer made them oatmeal with brown sugar, poured juice into plastic cups decorated with cartoon characters. She packed Emma's lunch for school, a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, a juice box. She reminded Emma to wear her hat. She kissed both children on the tops of their heads. She told them to be good. She told them she loved them. Michael came downstairs at 6:45, still in his undershirt and boxer shorts, scratching his stomach. He poured himself coffee. He asked Jennifer what time she would be home. She said 3 o'clock, same as always. He nodded. He said he might stop by the hardware store after work, needed some screws for a project in the garage. She said okay. She gathered her coat, her purse, her car keys. She went to the front door. Michael followed her. He stood in the doorway as she walked down the front steps to the driveway where her car, a 1994 Honda Civic, was parked. He waved. She waved back. She got into the car. The engine turned over on the second try. She backed out of the driveway. She turned left onto Birch Street. She drove away. That was the last time anyone saw Jennifer Walsh alive. By 7:30 that morning, Jennifer should have arrived at Riverside Textiles, a 10-minute drive from her home. Her shift began at 7:45. She was never late. She prided herself on never being late. But when the shift supervisor, a woman named Donna Kelleher, took attendance at 8 o'clock, Jennifer's station was empty. Donna called the Walsh home at 8:15. Michael answered. Donna asked if Jennifer was sick. Michael said no, she had left for work that morning, same as always. Donna said Jennifer had not arrived. There was a pause on the line. Michael said that was strange. Donna asked if he knew where she might have gone. Michael said he did not know. He said he would make some calls. He said he would call her back. Michael Walsh called the Rochester Police Department at 9:47 that morning. He spoke to the desk sergeant, a man named Paul Hennigan. Michael said his wife had left for work that morning and never arrived. He said he had called her friends, called her mother, called the factory again. No one had seen her. Sergeant Hennigan took down the information. He asked Michael what Jennifer had been wearing. Michael said jeans, a sweater, maybe a blue one. He could not remember exactly. Hennigan asked what kind of car she drove. Michael gave him the make, model, and license plate number. Hennigan said he would send an officer to the house. Officer Dave Morty arrived at the Walsh home at 10:30. He was 28 years old, had been on the force for 3 years. He knocked on the front door. Michael answered. Morty noted in his report that Michael Walsh appeared calm, almost unnaturally so. His eyes were dry, his voice was steady. He invited Morty inside. The house smelled like coffee and something else, something chemical, maybe cleaning products. Morty asked Michael to walk him through the morning again. Michael did. Same story. Jennifer left at 6:50, said she was going to work. Never arrived. Morty asked if they had argued. Michael said no. Morty asked if Jennifer had seemed upset about anything. Michael said no, everything was fine. Morty asked if Jennifer had ever disappeared before. Michael said never. Morty asked if he could look around. Michael said sure, go ahead. Morty walked through the house. Everything appeared orderly. The kitchen was clean. The children's toys were put away. Upstairs, the bed was made. Jennifer's clothes hung in the closet. Her toothbrush was in the bathroom. Morty asked Michael if anything was missing. Michael said he did not think so. Morty asked about Jennifer's purse. Michael said she had taken it with her. Morty asked about her wallet, her driver's license. Michael said those would be in her purse. Morty asked if Jennifer had any credit cards. Michael said they had one joint credit card, but Jennifer never used it. By noon, the Rochester Police Department had issued a beyond-the-lookout alert for Jennifer Walsh and her 1994 Honda Civic. By 1 o'clock, officers were canvassing the route between the Walsh home and Riverside Textiles, a distance of 4.3 miles along residential streets, and then Route 16. No one had seen the car. No one had seen Jennifer. By 2 o'clock, the police had contacted Jennifer's mother, a woman named Carol Brennan who lived in nearby Dover. Carol said she had not spoken to Jennifer in 3 days. She said it was not unusual for them to go a few days without talking. She said Jennifer seemed fine when they last spoke, maybe a little tired, but fine. Carol asked if something had happened to her daughter. The officer on the phone said they were trying to locate her. At 3 o'clock, when Jennifer should have been arriving home from her shift, search teams were organizing. Volunteers from the community gathered at the police station. They were given areas to search: wooded lots along Route 16, the parking lots of closed businesses, the banks of the Cochico River. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees. The wind cut through coats and gloves. Searchers called Jennifer's name into the frozen air. Their voices echoed and died. The swing hung still. The toy truck lay on its side. That evening, Michael Walsh appeared on the local news. He stood on his front porch, his hands in his pockets, and spoke to a reporter from WMUR Channel 9. He said Jennifer was a wonderful mother, a wonderful wife. He said he could not imagine where she might be. He said he just wanted her to come home. He said the children missed her. The reporter asked if the police suspected foul play. Michael said he did not know what the police suspected. He said he hoped Jennifer was safe. He said if anyone had seen her, please call the police. His eyes were dry. His voice was steady. By midnight, more than 200 people had searched for Jennifer Walsh. They had found nothing. No car, no purse, no sign of struggle, no blood. The forest kept its secrets. The river flowed dark and silent beneath a skin of ice. And in the house on Birch Street, Michael Walsh tucked his children into bed, turned off the lights, and closed the door. Part 2. The Investigation. The search for Jennifer Walsh intensified over the following days. By Friday morning, the New Hampshire State Police had joined the investigation, bringing tracking dogs and additional personnel. The dogs were taken to the Walsh home, allowed to smell Jennifer's clothing, and then released to search. They followed a scent from the front door to the driveway, then lost it. Investigators found this curious. If Jennifer had driven away in her car, the dogs would not have been able to track her scent beyond the driveway. But if she had not driven away, where was the car? On Friday afternoon, Jennifer's 1994 Honda Civic was discovered in the parking lot of a defunct shopping plaza approximately 8 miles from her home, in the opposite direction from Riverside Textiles. The plaza had been closed for 2 years. The parking lot was vast and empty, cracked asphalt covered in patches of ice and snow. The car was parked near the back of the lot, far from the road, as if someone had wanted it to be inconspicuous. The doors were locked. The keys were not inside. Detective Linda Chen, who had been assigned as lead investigator on the case, arrived at the scene at 2:15 in the afternoon. She was 39 years old, had been with the Rochester Police Department for 14 years, had worked homicides in Boston before moving to New Hampshire for what she thought would be a quieter life. She circled the car slowly, noting the details. No damage to the exterior. No signs of a struggle. Snow on the hood and roof, but not thick, suggesting the car had been parked here recently, maybe within the last day or two. She called for a tow truck and had the vehicle transported to the police impound lot for processing. Inside the car, forensic technicians found Jennifer's purse on the passenger seat. Her wallet was inside, containing her driver's license, $17 in cash, and the joint credit card Michael had mentioned. Her cell phone, a small flip phone, was in the center console. The phone was turned off. When technicians turned it on, there were no missed calls, no messages. The last call Jennifer had made was to her mother, 3 days before she disappeared, a conversation lasting 6 minutes. The car's gas tank was 3/4 full. The odometer read 72,431 miles. Detective Chen found this perplexing. If Jennifer had driven to this abandoned parking lot, why would she leave her purse, her phone, her money? And if she had not driven here herself, who had? Chen returned to the Walsh home that evening. Michael was in the living room with his children watching television. Chen asked if she could speak with him privately. They went into the kitchen. Chen asked Michael if he had any idea why Jennifer's car would be at the abandoned shopping plaza on Route 202. Michael said he did not. Chen asked if Jennifer had any connection to that location. Michael said not that he knew of. Chen asked if Michael had been to that plaza recently. Michael said no. Chen asked if she could see Michael's car. Michael said sure. Michael's vehicle, a 1997 Ford F-150 pickup truck, was parked in the garage. Chen walked around it looking for anything unusual. The truck was clean, recently washed. Chen asked Michael when he had last washed it. Michael said he could not remember, maybe a few days ago. Chen made a note. She asked Michael what he had done on Thursday morning after Jennifer left for work. Michael said he had gotten the kids ready for school, dropped Emma off at Rochester Elementary at 8:30, taken Connor to his mother's house because daycare was closed that day, then gone to work at McIntyre's garage. Chen asked what time he arrived at work. Michael said around 9:15. Chen asked what time he left. Michael said around 5:30. Chen asked if anyone could verify that. Michael said sure, his boss, his coworkers. Chen spoke with Michael's boss, a man named Frank McIntyre, the next morning. McIntyre confirmed that Michael had arrived at work around 9:15 on Thursday and had left around 5:30. He said Michael had seemed normal, worked on a transmission job and an oil change. Chen asked if Michael had left the garage at any point during the day. McIntyre paused. He said Michael had taken a lunch break around noon, had been gone for about an hour, maybe a little more. Chen asked if that was unusual. McIntyre said not really, guys took lunch when they could. Chen asked where Michael had gone for lunch. McIntyre said he assumed Michael went home or got food somewhere. He did not know. An hour for lunch, 60 minutes. Chen drove from McIntyre's garage to the abandoned shopping plaza where Jennifer's car had been found. The drive took 14 minutes. Round trip, 28 minutes. Add 10 minutes to park the car, wipe it down, walk away. That left 22 minutes unaccounted for. 22 minutes for lunch, maybe, or 22 minutes for something else. Chen interviewed Jennifer's coworkers at Riverside Textiles. They described Jennifer as quiet, reliable, kind. They said she never talked about problems at home. When pressed, some admitted that Jennifer had seemed tired lately, maybe a little withdrawn. One woman, a coworker named Rita Sanchez, said that about 2 weeks before Jennifer disappeared, she had noticed a bruise on Jennifer's upper arm. Rita had asked Jennifer about it. Jennifer had said she bumped into a door. Rita said Jennifer would not meet her eyes when she said it. Those who knew him said Michael Walsh had a temper, but no one wanted to say it outright, as if speaking the words might make them complicit in something they could not yet name. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves about inconsistencies in Michael's story. He said Jennifer left at 6:50 in the morning. Her shift started at 7:45. The drive was 10 minutes. That meant Jennifer had 35 minutes unaccounted for. Where had she gone? Michael said he did not know. He said maybe she stopped for coffee. But Jennifer always made coffee at home. She brought it in a thermos. The thermos was found in the car, still full, still warm when the car was discovered. Which meant Jennifer had made coffee, poured it, gotten into her car and driven somewhere but not to work. And then the car had been moved. And then Jennifer had vanished. The police conducted a grid search of the area surrounding the abandoned shopping plaza. They searched the woods, the drainage ditches, and old gravel pit. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no signs of a struggle. It was as if Jennifer Walsh had simply dissolved into the cold January air, leaving behind only her car, her purse, and a thermos of cold coffee. By the end of January, the investigation had produced no solid leads. Michael Walsh had taken a polygraph test at the request of the police. The results were inconclusive. He was not arrested. He was not charged. He was simply a person of interest, a phrase that meant everything and nothing. The media coverage began to fade. The volunteers stopped showing up for searches. Life in Rochester returned to its normal rhythms, though quieter now, shadowed by the absence of Jennifer Walsh and the unspoken suspicion that the person who knew what happened to her was still living in the pale yellow Cape Cod on Birch Street, tucking his children into bed each night, turning off the lights, closing the door. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the cold creep of suspicion against your better judgment, you understand the paralysis it creates. You see the person you know, the person you have always known, and you cannot reconcile that person with the terrible thought taking shape in your mind. And so you say nothing. You wait. You hope you are wrong, and the silence grows. Part 3: The Silence. By the summer of 1999, 6 months after Jennifer Walsh vanished, Michael Walsh had settled into a new routine. He still worked at McIntyre's garage. He still lived in the house on Birch Street. His mother cared for the children during the day while he was at work. The police had stopped calling. The reporters had stopped coming. The town had moved on, at least on the surface, though people still talked about Jennifer in low voices at Bernie's diner and the grocery store checkout line. They talked about how strange it was that she had just disappeared. They talked about how Michael seemed fine, almost too fine, as if his wife had not been missing for half a year. Jennifer's mother, Carol Brennan, had not moved on. She called Detective Chen twice a week, asking if there were any updates. Chen always said the same thing. They were still investigating. They had not given up. Carol did not believe her. Carol believed her daughter was dead. She believed Michael Walsh had killed her. She said so publicly at a candlelight vigil held in Rochester that August. She stood in front of a crowd of perhaps 50 people, tears streaming down her face, and said, "My daughter did not just leave. She would never leave her children. Someone took her from us. And I believe that someone is living in my daughter's house, sleeping in my daughter's bed." Michael Walsh did not attend the vigil. Inside the house on Birch Street, a different kind of silence had taken hold. Emma, now 7 years old, had become withdrawn. She stopped talking at school. Her teacher, Mrs. Patricia Donovan, called Michael in for a conference in October. Mrs. Donovan said Emma was falling behind. She was not turning in homework. She was not playing with other children at recess. She sat by herself, drawing pictures. Mrs. Donovan showed Michael some of the pictures: dark houses, figures with no faces, trees with no leaves. One picture showed a small person in a corner and a large person standing over them, the large person's hand raised. Mrs. Donovan asked Michael if everything was all right at home. Michael said his wife was missing, so no, everything was not all right. Mrs. Donovan suggested counseling for Emma. Michael said he would think about it. He never scheduled an appointment. Connor, now 5, had nightmares. Michael's mother mentioned this to him once, said Connor woke up screaming several nights a week. She asked Michael if Connor had seen something the day Jennifer disappeared. Michael said no. She asked if Michael was sure. Michael said he was sure. She let it drop. What else could she do? He was her son. Jennifer was gone. The children needed stability. You hold together the life you have left, even when it is built on a foundation you dare not examine too closely. In December of 1999, nearly a year after Jennifer disappeared, Michael Walsh began dating a woman named Angela Porter. She was 26, worked as a receptionist at a dental office, had never been married. They met at a bar in Dover. She knew who he was, of course. Everyone in the area knew who he was. The man whose wife had vanished. But Angela believed in second chances. She believed in seeing the good in people. Michael was charming when he wanted to be. He made her laugh. He took her to dinner at the Italian restaurant on Main Street. He introduced her to his children in January of 2000. Emma looked at her and said nothing. Connor hid behind his father's leg. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, the psychological weight is unbearable. It follows you into every room. It sits beside you at the dinner table. It watches you while you sleep. Angela tried not to think about Jennifer Walsh. She tried to focus on Michael, on building something new with him. But there were moments, small moments, when doubt crept in. Like the time she found a photograph of Jennifer hidden in Michael's dresser drawer, and when she asked him about it, he snatched it from her hand and said it was none of her business. Like the time Connor drew a picture at kindergarten of a woman lying on the ground, and when the teacher asked who it was, Connor said, "Mommy's sleeping." The teacher called Michael. Michael said the boy was confused. The teacher did not seem convinced. By the spring of 2001, Angela had moved into the house on Birch Street. Carol Brennan was furious. She called Michael and screamed at him, asked how dare he replace her daughter, asked how dare he move another woman into Jennifer's home. Michael hung up on her. Carol hired a lawyer, filed for grandparent visitation rights. The case dragged through family court for months. In the end, Carol was granted supervised visitation with Emma and Connor twice a month. When she saw them, she asked questions. She asked if they remembered their mother. Emma nodded but said nothing. Connor said, "Daddy says we don't talk about Mommy." Carol asked why. Connor shrugged. Carol asked if Daddy said anything else about Mommy. Connor looked at the floor. He said, "Daddy says Mommy went away." Carol asked where Mommy went. Connor said, "Daddy says she's not coming back." Angela and Michael married in November of 2002, a small ceremony at the courthouse. No reception, no celebration, just paperwork. Just Michael's attempt to make official what Jennifer's absence had created. Emma, now 10, refused to attend. She stayed with Carol Brennan that day. Connor, now 8, stood beside his father, wearing a suit that was too big for him, his face blank. Angela wore a cream-colored dress and held a bouquet of grocery store flowers. The judge pronounced them husband and wife. Michael kissed her. Connor looked away. The marriage lasted 18 months. Angela would later tell police that living in that house was like living inside a held breath. No one spoke about Jennifer, but Jennifer was everywhere. Her clothes still hung in the basement storage room. Her coffee mug was still in the cabinet. Emma slept with one of Jennifer's old sweaters under her pillow. Connor sometimes called Angela Mommy and then burst into tears. And Michael grew more distant, more irritable. He drank more. He stayed out late. He came home with the smell of motor oil and whiskey. When Angela asked where he had been, he told her to mind her own business. When she asked about Jennifer, about what he thought had happened, he said, "She's gone. That's all that matters." In April of 2004, Angela moved out. She took her belongings and left without saying goodbye to the children. She would later say she felt guilty about that, but she could not stay. Something was wrong in that house, something beyond grief, beyond loss. It was a wrongness that lived in the walls, in the silence, in Michael's eyes when he thought no one was watching. She filed for divorce in May. Michael did not contest it. By August, it was finalized. Angela would tell her friends she had dodged a bullet. She would tell them she was lucky to get out. When they asked what she meant, she would shake her head and say, "I just know." Emma, now 12, began seeing a therapist in the fall of 2004, a woman named Dr. Sarah Lindstrom. Carol Brennan had insisted on it, had paid for it herself. Dr. Lindstrom met with Emma once a week for 3 months before Emma said anything meaningful. When she finally did, it was in a whisper so quiet that Dr. Lindstrom had to lean forward to hear. Emma said, "I think my dad hurt my mom." Dr. Lindstrom asked why she thought that. Emma said, "Because I heard them fighting the night before she left. They were yelling, and then it got quiet, and then I heard something heavy being moved." Dr. Lindstrom asked what Emma heard after that. Emma said, "Nothing, just quiet." Dr. Lindstrom reported this to Child Protective Services as required by law. CPS opened an investigation. They interviewed Emma. They interviewed Connor. Connor said he did not remember anything about the day his mother disappeared. He said he had been at his grandmother's house. They interviewed Michael. Michael said Emma was confused, traumatized by her mother's disappearance, manufacturing memories to explain something she did not understand. CPS closed the case for lack of evidence. Dr. Lindstrom continued to see Emma. Emma continued to whisper her suspicions, her fears, her certainty that her mother had not just left. The years passed slowly in Rochester. Jennifer Walsh became a ghost, a story people told, a cautionary tale about the dangers of being a woman, of being too quiet, of marrying the wrong man. The case remained officially open, but it was cold, buried under newer crimes, fresher tragedies. Detective Chen retired in 2003. The new lead investigator inherited a file box full of reports and dead ends. He read through it once, made a few calls, found nothing new, and moved on to cases that seemed solvable. If you have noticed, in cases like this, the truth often emerges not from some dramatic breakthrough but from the slow accumulation of pressure over time. A child grows up. A silence becomes unbearable. A conscience, however small, begins to speak. This is what happened in the winter of 2005, nearly 6 years after Jennifer Walsh vanished. Connor Walsh, now 10 years old, told his school counselor that he was having nightmares about his mother. The counselor asked what the nightmares were about. Connor said he dreamed that his mother was calling for him, but he could not find her. The counselor asked if Connor remembered his mother. Connor said not really. The counselor asked what Connor did remember. Connor was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I remember my dad putting something in the shed." Part 4. The Revelation. The school counselor, a woman named Judith Hayes, reported Connor's statement to the Rochester Police Department on February 3, 2005. The officer who took the call was Dave Morty, the same officer who had responded to the Walsh home on the day Jennifer disappeared, now a detective with 6 years more experience and a much deeper cynicism about human nature. Morty remembered the case well. He remembered Michael Walsh's unnatural calm. He remembered the way the house had smelled like cleaning products. He remembered thinking, even then, that something was wrong. He requested the case file be pulled from storage. On February 7, 2005, Detective Morty obtained a search warrant for the Walsh property. The warrant specifically authorized the search of the detached shed in the backyard, the garage, and the basement. At 7 o'clock in the morning, Morty and 4 other officers arrived at the house on Birch Street. Michael Walsh answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Morty handed him the warrant. Michael read it silently. He said, "You won't find anything." Morty said, "We'll see." Emma and Connor were taken to Carol Brennan's house while the search was conducted. The officers started with the shed. It was approximately 10 feet by 12 feet, with a concrete floor and walls lined with pegboard holding tools. There was a riding mower, a workbench, metal shelving unit stacked with paint cans and motor oil. Morty stood in the center of the shed and looked around. He thought about what Connor had said. "My dad putting something in the shed." Putting what? Putting it where? One of the officers, a young patrolman named Eric Torres, noticed that one section of the concrete floor did not quite match the rest. The color was slightly different, the surface slightly smoother, as if it had been patched or repaired. Torres pointed it out to Morty. Morty knelt down and ran his hand over the concrete. It was newer concrete, he was certain. He called for ground-penetrating radar equipment. The GPR technician arrived at 10:30. He set up the equipment and began scanning the shed floor. Within 15 minutes, the equipment detected an anomaly beneath the newer concrete, approximately 3 feet by 6 feet, approximately 3 feet deep. Morty felt his pulse quicken. He called for a jackhammer. By noon, officers had broken through the concrete and begun excavating the dirt beneath. By 12:45, they found her. Jennifer Walsh was buried in a shallow grave beneath the shed floor, wrapped in a blue plastic tarp. She was still wearing the clothes she had been wearing on the morning she disappeared: jeans, a blue sweater. Her skull had been fractured by blunt force trauma. Her neck had been broken. The medical examiner would later determine that Jennifer Walsh had been dead for approximately 6 years, killed by multiple blows to the head, likely from a heavy object like a hammer or a wrench, and that her body had been buried shortly after death. Michael Walsh was arrested at 1:15 in the afternoon on February 7, 2005. He was standing in the driveway when Morty approached him. Morty said, "Michael Walsh, you are under arrest for the murder of Jennifer Walsh." Michael said nothing. His face was blank. His eyes were dry. He held out his wrists for the handcuffs. As Morty led him to the patrol car, a neighbor, a woman who had lived on Birch Street for 30 years, watched from her window and thought, "I knew it. We all knew it. We just did not want to believe it." The news spread through Rochester like fire. WMUR Channel 9 ran the story as breaking news. Body found in Walsh backyard, husband arrested. Reporters descended on Birch Street. Neighbors gave interviews. They said Michael had always seemed odd. They said Jennifer had seemed afraid. They said they wished they had done something, said something, called someone. The vigil crowd from 1999 gathered again, this time not to remember Jennifer but to demand justice for her. Carol Brennan stood before the cameras and wept. She said, "I knew he killed my daughter. I knew it from the first day. And no one listened to me." Michael Walsh's trial began in October of 2005. The prosecution presented a timeline. On the morning of January 14, 1999, Jennifer Walsh had not driven to work. She had never left the house. She had been killed in the early morning, likely around 7 o'clock, during an argument with her husband. Michael had struck her repeatedly with a hammer found in the shed, a hammer that still had trace amounts of blood on it despite attempts to clean it. He had wrapped her body in a tarp, placed it in the trunk of his truck, and driven to work. During his lunch break, he had returned home, dug a shallow grave in the shed floor, buried Jennifer, and poured new concrete over the grave. He had then driven Jennifer's car to the abandoned shopping plaza, wiped it clean of fingerprints, and walked the 4 miles back to work. The odometer on his truck showed he had driven 48 miles that day, exactly the distance required to make those trips. The prosecution called Emma Walsh to the stand. She was 13 years old. She wore a navy blue dress and kept her eyes on the floor. The prosecutor asked Emma if she remembered the night before her mother disappeared. Emma said yes. The prosecutor asked what she remembered. Emma said, "I heard my parents fighting. My dad was yelling. My mom was crying. I heard something break like glass. And then I heard my mom scream. And then it got quiet." The prosecutor asked what happened next. Emma said, "I heard my dad moving something heavy, like he was dragging something. And then I heard the back door open, and then close." The prosecutor asked Emma if she had told anyone about this at the time. Emma shook her head. The prosecutor asked why not. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. She said, "Because I was scared. I was scared of my dad, and I didn't want to believe he would hurt my mom." The defense argued that there was no physical evidence directly linking Michael Walsh to the murder. The hammer had been cleaned. The tarp was generic, sold at dozens of stores. Michael's DNA was not found on Jennifer's body because the defense argued, of course, his DNA would be on his wife's body. They lived together. The defense suggested that Jennifer had been killed by an unknown assailant and that someone else had buried her body in the shed. The jury did not believe it. On November 18, 2005, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury found Michael Walsh guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the sentence was read, Michael Walsh showed no emotion. He was led from the courtroom in handcuffs. Emma Walsh, sitting in the gallery beside her grandmother, finally allowed herself to cry. The house on Birch Street was sold in 2006. The new owners tore down the shed and poured a new foundation. They painted the house a different color, replaced the windows, planted new flowers. They tried to make it a place where the past did not live in every corner, but the neighbors still knew. They still whispered. And when children played in the yard, their parents watched from the windows, remembering the little girl and little boy who had lost their mother to the violence of the man who was supposed to protect her.